Good morning from Minnesota. It's still no, it's afternoon already there by 2 minutes in Maryland. Yes. Luther Kruger here with the Big Blue Sun Museum of Solar Cooking based in Minneapolis. And I am glad to say I was able to snag Douglas Danley's time to talk about his project with solar cooking through photovoltaic to a battery into the cooker or even direct to the cooker. But we'll talk about what he's got going there. And where that fits in the grand scheme of things for solar cooking at large, and also segueing into stuff where families and villages can get empowered with solar energy. Maybe starting with solar cooking is kind of the foot in the door. It's my impression anyway. So talking to Douglas out in Maryland, and I just have the 3 questions. We'll start right off the bat.
Okay.
How did you first learn about solar energy in any way, shape, or form, and ultimately led to cooking with solar energy? We'll start with that. Where did it all start?
So in 1979, my wife and I got married in August and left for Peace Corps in November. So our honeymoon was basically 3.5 years in Botswana in Africa. I worked with a crew setting up a local government maintenance department for water pumping systems, primarily diesel-powered water pumping, and then the reticulation systems. And then Teresa was a rural industrial officer, so she worked with trying to promote local businesses out in the villages to prevent urban migration. So we lived in a rural village for the most part. We did not have running water. We did not have electricity. Wrote our letters home by kerosene paraffin lamp. Very fond memories of that. But we did have a propane stove, LPG stove. So we were fine. We could cook pretty much anything we wanted. A couple of years into that, I was getting bored, and Teresa had a project where one of her groups needed a water pump. And I worked with a local solar company and my crew, and we actually installed Botswana's first deep well water pump in 1982. So that was my introduction to solar, was February 1982, I guess 40 years ago. I remember when it was first mentioned to me about solar water pumping, I said that was the stupidest idea I'd ever heard, because all I could see was the space stuff, and thinking how expensive it was. I've been working in solar ever since then. I've worked on village electrification projects in different countries around the world, and I have worked with companies, especially the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association, NRECA, here in the US, on grid-scaled solar and energy storage and microgrids here in the US. But my real love is rural village electrification. I found villages around the world have a lot of things in common, whether it's in Papua New Guinea or in Mali or Malawi. There are obvious cultural differences, but there's a lot of things that are very similar. So that was how I got involved in solar. I basically got involved in 40 years ago and have been involved in it since. So I've watched a lot of things come and go.
Yeah, and then so the next step, solar cooking. How did you reach that?
So about 4 years ago, 2 of my network of colleagues both asked me the same month, which one from Colorado and one from Maryland, does cooking with photovoltaic, solar electric make any sense? And the answer has always been no. The answer is it's too expensive. Well, I had learned in my work with grid scale projects that the price of large scale, these 72 cell, the big ones, has fallen to such a dramatic level that changed that economics. But I said, how much electricity does it actually take to cook food, right? It seems like you need to start with a load. So you need an energy budget. And so I did what any normal person would do. I Googled it. how much electricity does it take to cook in Shima, which is the standard ugali and Shima, the corn porridge that's used all through Africa. And Google did not know.
What?
I found something that Google did not know, which meant that it was very early on in this whole process. Turns out Teresa and I bought an portable induction cooker, induction cooktop for $50 off Amazon, which was the second one. I thought induction stoves were a luxury,
Right.
but then I found out that they cost $50 on Amazon, single quantity, right? And we plugged it into a kilowatt meter, one of the most useful things in the world, and started measuring how much it took to cook foods like enshima, ugali, stewed vegetables, rice, how much energy it took to boil water, dal bhat, Indian, Nepalese food, stir-fried foods, South Asia, rice and beans for Haiti. Started cooking all kinds of different things and basically came up with an energy budget, a little bit conservative, that 2 kilowatt hours a day would make sufficient food for a family of 6, a typical family of 6, while still allowing energy for the other 2 important things that electricity can do, which is mobile phone recharging, which people pay an amazing amount of money in these countries to recharge. And everybody knows about walking for miles to collect food or clean water, but people actually walk for miles to recharge their cell phones.
But it's a quick interjection. Maybe it was on the same ISIS conference that I watched, where they mentioned one country where a third of the economy or a third of the transactions are phone wallet transactions. Yes. They're not through. I mean,
M-Pesa, mobile money, and pay-as-you-go financing, which 5 years ago was still a kind of a new idea, but now has become accepted for all kinds of things, from energy to motorcycles to refrigeration, cold storage. Everybody's doing pay-as-you-go microfinancing. So if you put those 3 together, I ran the economics and then did some research on how much people are paying for charcoal in markets in Africa where they're buying charcoal, and realized that at scale, it is now more cost effective to cook with electricity generated by PV than it is to buy charcoal. At scale, we have to get to scale, obviously. So we built a SunSpot. I've got one, the one I use. I'm doing programming testing on it back here. So I've got it on my workbench. And so we figured out how much the components cost and what they would cost in the future. We got some funding. One of the other groups that's working on this is the Modern Energy Cooking Services out of the United Kingdom. I won't even pronounce the university is like Leicester or Leicestershire or something like that. I don't even know how to pronounce it. And Simon Batchelor in particular is one of the true leaders in this field. But MEX has been involved in promoting electric cooking projects, both on-grid and off-grid, around the world. They funded a project. We put in a bid through EarthSpark International, which currently runs 2 microgrids in rural Haiti and has contract, I think, for 16 or 18 more. Alison Archambault is a very dedicated and very far-reaching woman. She talks about feminist electrification and all kinds of things, but she is really one of the bright lights in the world. And she latched on to cooking very early. So the project was 20 systems on their solar-powered microgrid and 10 off-grid systems. We actually only got 8 in. It happened right during COVID, so I never even got to go down there. So our plan is to have these things locally assembled and installed. And the very first one, we couldn't even do training except by video. because of COVID. So they actually put them together. We shipped them all the components. They put them together and installed them and monitored people's use, and was pretty overwhelmingly a success for what we were trying to accomplish. People adjusted very quickly. They discovered they could cook everything except breadfruit on one of these induction cooktops or in the electric pressure cooker, which is the other technology, depending on what you're cooking. Breadfruits are like this big or something, and they tend to cook them in pots that are this big. So they're going to have to find a different way of doing that. But people adjusted very, very quickly. Some of the things they liked and some of the things I've heard is it reduced their time spent cooking by more than half. Especially the electric pressure cooker, you can literally set and forget. You turn it on, the Instant Pot. You turn it on and hour later your meal's ready. Works fantastic for rice and beans. Does not work as well for chapatis, for example. It's hard to cook a chapati down inside the pressure cooker. But on an induction cooktop, instant on off like gas. So any time of day, you just hit it. So people were talking about being able to cook breakfast for their children before they went to school, which they never could before because it took too long to build the fire. One woman was talking about being able to make a cup of tea inside her house in the middle of the night because she had asthma, respiratory related diseases, and she could just take 5 minutes and heat up a couple cups of water and make tea without starting charcoal fires and everything else. So there's a lot of advantages. People said they didn't want to go back to charcoal at all. Since then, we have been working with a number of companies, and I really can't say exactly, but some large organizations to try to get larger scale pilot projects. We applied for the International Solar Energy Society Renewable Transformation Challenge Award, which the goal of that is to have a world that is 100% renewable energy. And we sent it in, and to our immense surprise, we won the global award with more than 115 entries. And that gave us a lot of publicity. And ever since then, people have been discovering it and sending me emails. And I've got emails from 20 or 25 countries talking about how do we implement this. We are trying to do it the right way. I'm working with a group, and we started a company, SunSpotPV LLC, that we want to run it as a type of franchise where we have a local partner that is basically running it, and we provide back-end services, consolidated purchasing, access to financing, training, improved products, things like this, and get it to them. But they do the assembly in country, the installation in country, and the maintenance. And it's all two models we're working with. One is pay-as-you-go, where the franchise partner would finance it, install it at the customer's place, and then they would pay every month or whatever period of time is appropriate. And it would basically eliminate their expense on charcoal. Numbers I've seen say people are spending, for example, in Kenya, $25 a month on charcoal in Kenya and Rwanda. And then if you add lighting costs to that, are another $10 to $15 a month for lighting, and then mobile phone charging. We think we can, our goal, and I'll be straightforward, I don't know, we'll ever get there, but our goal is $25 a month. We want to provide this for $25 a month. I'll stick that stake in the ground right now. And that's a system that basically the SunSpot consists of 2 of the utility scale solar modules. Our project down in Haiti uses 2 350 watt modules, which used to be 72 cell modules, but now they're 60 cell modules, right? I mean, things are changing, so it's hard to keep up. But 700 watts of PV. is kind of what we're aiming for, 700, 800 watts of PV. So that's a lot more than, you know, a typical solar home system, 15-watt panel. We're talking 700 watts. And then we need batteries for two reasons. One, so that you can run lighting at night, but the other so that you can absorb the solar energy and not be restricted to only cooking when the sun is out, because, you know, some places it's sunny in the morning and then it gets cloudy in the afternoon and different things. So, you know, we've done the technical analysis to say this is how you size it, round trip efficiencies of batteries. We're currently using Firefly lead carbon batteries, and I don't mind giving them a shout out because they are, in my mind, one of the best, most cost-effective lead acid, lead carbon batteries available. I think the world is moving toward lithium batteries, lithium iron phosphate in particular, and maybe lithium metal in the future. It's still a bit expensive. If we can figure out how to use those, we will probably move toward those in the future. We're following choosing the best things. And then we have an Inverter Max power tracker in it right now. So it's running, the appliances are run on AC. If you watch our videos from the American Made Solar Prize, we got an early development award from the American Made Solar Prize. We actually developed a way to run commercial induction cookers off of high voltage DC directly. So we can use commercially available pressure cookers and induction cookers and run it off DC, which means we go from an inverter, you know, that's this big to a DC to DC converter that's this big, more efficient, more reliable, and half the cost. So our goal right now is to build pilot projects, large-scale pilot projects, so we can get it out and start gaining the experience of how people actually use it. Initial results from us, from MEX, from the ECOA project in Malawi, are that people will accept it very quickly. There's not a lot of, you know, people talk to me, oh, I like the smell of smoke in my food or something.
Oh,
and
no. We do, because smoke as campfire, it's a luxury. But for them,
right.
you know,
Well,
hey,
no,
I'm going to ditch that smoke if I can get my food without having to walk 5 miles for it.
Yeah, I doubt any woman who is cooking over these fires has ever said that. I don't know who's saying it, whether it's the man or whether it's us here, you know, but that has not turned out to be a problem. Pretty much anything you can cook over a 3-stone fire, you can cook over an induction cooktop. There are actually standards for clean cooking, because one of the other things people have been working on for 20 or 30 years is improved charcoal and improved wood cook stoves, biogas stoves, pellet stoves, improved airflow, rocket stoves, things like that. So the international, is it the IEC, has an actual standard and testing for improved cook stoves on how to measure the efficiency and the safety of improved cook stoves. So in terms of efficiency, I have measured the efficiency of boiling a pot of water on my induction cooktop back here at 82% efficient. The highest tier in the clean cooking world is 40% efficient. That's a tier 4.
When you say the 82%, 80 whatever percent, that's the energy from the panels to the cooker. The panels are still what, 18-20%.
Right. No, that's an AC. That's electricity to water. You put a pot of water on an induction thing, how fast it boils, and so you get that. There's also no open flames on either an induction or an electric pressure cooker. Now the surface will get hot because the pot is sitting on the surface and the pot is getting hot, so it will conduct energy back down into the glass surface. So it will get as hot as whatever pot or pan you're on. But once you turn the induction cooker off or take the pan away, it turns off by itself. It cools down very rapidly. So getting rid of open flames, the whole tipping concern about starting your house on fire. We had friends in Africa who burned down their houses because their cooking got out of control. So the safety, obviously, as with any solar cooking, you eliminate toxic cooking smoke. You don't reduce it by 50%. You don't reduce carbon emissions by 50%, as with any. Now, there's still a carbon footprint. Acknowledge there's a carbon footprint to manufacture the batteries and the solar and the various other things. But that has been shown to be relatively minor compared with the lifetime of the system. So basically, we feel that out of the 3 billion people in the world that are cooking with, I'm going to tell a story in a second, but that are cooking with biomass, we feel that there's enough of a market for all kinds of different technologies. We think, we're focusing on solar electric because that's what I'm good at. And we feel that that's got real economic potential, but that doesn't mean that other people aren't coming up with good ideas. So my story, and you can decide, Luther, whether to leave this in there or not, is my favorite Far Side cartoon was a Tibetan yak herder coming into his hut, and his wife is putting stuff on the table. And he says, "Cold cuts again?" And she says, "Yes, the yak has diarrhea." Which is only funny if you've ever actually been someplace where they cook food over cow manure or yak manure. It's a real thing. It's shocking, but that's the way the world is.
Sure.
So that I don't know. Did I answer one question? Both questions?
No, that's great. I do have some follow-ups, but I mean, that was so thorough. I wanted to mention I mentioned Alan Bigelow and the Pep Test for solar thermal cookers. And the first thing he says is, temperature. Everyone looks at temperature. Does my sun oven get up to whatever degrees in the winter and blah blah blah? And he says, that's. He doesn't put it this way, but I do, because I teach public and nonprofit administration, where we can't always measure exactly what we want. So we come up with proxy measures. So people with a solar thermal cooker can say, well, I know my sun oven gets up to at least 300 degrees by 10 a.m. if I leave it out first. And then I know whatever cooks won't get more than 212, because that's the water in the food cooking it. And so they understand it. But he says, well, what that is, that 212, getting that water up to boiling, that's the easiest and most accurate way to measure a cooker's power is through watts. And it speaks to the point you are making, and those that are putting together the PV to cooker makers are making, which is, now that we know the costs, you can check the paper today probably somewhere, or Google it. Now you will be able to find, here's how much you can expect to pay per watt on your roof or wherever with these solar panels, and knowing how much it takes to cook food. So I'm affirming what you have to say about that.
Oh, I'm going to mention, a lot of things we've learned cooking. And so my wife and I bought this portable thing to make measurements. We ended up using that every single day for 4 years to cook most of our meals. Our kids are grown up and moved out, but we're cooking most of our meals on this induction cooktop. And because it was so good. So think about, how do you cook rice? What do you do when you cook rice? You put water and rice in. You turn it up to high until it gets to boiling, and then you turn it down, right? And put a lid on and simmer it. So there's 2 phases. When you're cooking a stew, you bring the water up to 212 with the meat and vegetables and stuff in it, and then you turn it down and let it simmer for a period of time. When you cook beans, you bring it up, you turn it down. When you cook stir fry or something, maybe you leave it at one temperature for a little while, but it's a much shorter period of time. So that's one big advantage of having a controllable appliance, is that it is adjustable. You're not wasting, if you have your parabolic dish that can get it up to 300 by injecting so many watts into it, what happens when you need to simmer and you don't need it? You have to move out of the focal point to adjust it. So essentially you're wasting energy, whereas with solar, you could potentially store that in a battery. Now, I know there are people who are looking at phase change materials, one of my favorite topics, and how to store that solar energy and things like that. So that's why I said there's a lot of different things. But one of the big advantages of the induction or the electric pressure cooker. Now, electric pressure cooker, let's talk about that. It turns out they are on-off devices. They seem very sophisticated with all of these controls you can press, an Instant Pot. It turns out they have a 1,000 watt heating element in them that it turns on and off. There's a relay in there. And everything it does is turns on and off and measures the temperature, which is a proxy for pressure. So if you were trying to run that by a solar module directly, you couldn't do it because number one, you'd need 1,000 watts of solar. And number two, when it turned off, what do you do with your solar? And believe me, once it's up to pressure, it's only on for like 5 seconds a minute or something. I mean, it's amazing how efficient that is. So there's a lot of advantages to having energy storage in with your cooking appliance and your solar source. Having energy storage, and a lot of people are working on that. I know, I've seen these insulated electric energy cookers and things like that. But to tell you the truth, a lot of it's going to be based on commercial availability, and everything we're using. We are developing our own power electronics to run off DC directly without the inverter. That's a long-term project, but so the first thing anybody says to me when I mention solar electric cooking, primarily from the clean cooking charcoal, improved charcoal, is it's too expensive. It's too expensive. How much does it cost? It's too expensive. They say, how much does it cost? I go, $25 a month. And they go, no, how much does it really cost? So the answer is it really costs $25 a month. But the capital cost is still quite high right now. Now, if you can finance that over 5 years or eventually 10 years with lithium batteries, easily a PV panel lasts 25 years, right? You mentioned that that's your expected life.
All energy solar.
And that's only getting down to 80%. It'll still keep going after that as long as you don't break it. But the goal is to reduce costs. So there's 2 ways to reduce costs. One is there's 3 ways to reduce costs. We actually, there's a 3rd way. Number 1 is through technology. I'm an engineer. I love technology. I love developing things. I love thinking about how can we drive the cost of this down. How do we optimize the size of the battery for way people? And this is why we need to actually see it use in, 500, 1,000 at a time, is because we need to see how people actually use it. Are they switching their behavior to cooking in the evening, which is harder on batteries, or are they still continuing to cook during the day? The second thing is through scale. If you can build up scale, obviously things become more efficient, they become less expensive. You can do things like that. And the third thing actually is something called carbon credits. Turns out there's a voluntary carbon market, and there are ways to access carbon credits. And I'll toss this number out. 4 carbon credits a year at $10 is $40 a year. That takes $4 a month off my $25 if we can access that. And who knows where that goes in the future.
Sure.
But so we're setting up a for-profit network, but a socially enterprising for-profit network. Nobody's going to get filthy rich off of this. It turns out there are a lot of companies who want to invest in things in this market. They want to invest in this bottom of the pyramid market if they can find a stable business to do it with. Turns out there's literally billions of dollars waiting if they can find a stable business plan. And that's one of the real challenges, is how do you set up a business plan? And we're working with some very smart people on how to do this. And I'm very excited personally to see. I'm also patient. You know, I've been working in solar for 40 years. I've watched a lot of things change. One of the stories I tell lots of stories. One of the stories I tell is 2002. I was trying to figure out how to reduce the cost of solar home systems. And I was looking at using yellow LEDs because I figure, hey, they make high pressure sodium lamps out of yellow light, you know, so yeah, it may not be as good as white light, but then white LEDs came out in 2002. And I said, this is going to change the world. So I built my first LED solar powered home solar system with white LEDs. And this is it, right? And you know what people said? It's too expensive. It's the wrong color lights. There's too many parts. It's not reliable. You'll never make it happen. That's, you know, that's silly. You'll never make it happen.
We haven't bought a light bulb in, I think, 4 years. I think we picked up a couple boxes of them at Menards or Home Depot. And, yeah.
USB powered,
yep.
LED, 5-watt LED, right? So this is where solar electric cooking is right now. We're in this too many wires, too many parts, too expensive. People won't accept it. This is where it's going to be in 20 years. The question is, how long does it take us to get there? So that's kind of
why you said that, because about 20 minutes ago, the thought entered my brain is this is actually going to be the LEDs of solar, of cooking, the LEDs of cooking, of the, yeah. And you've just said it better than I could.
And it's all completely going to be because of the geniuses here at Sunspot. No, there's a lot of good people working on this, a lot of people thinking about it. I'm sure there are going to be good ideas. We're out in front just because I tend to be out in front. I put in my first PV water pumping system in 1982. I designed my first solar diesel microgrid, put in Coconut Island, Australia in 1987. I was working on pay-as-you-go stuff in 2002, long before anybody else was doing it. So I've seen a lot of things come, and I think this is going to be one of them. I think it's very exciting. I want to mention a couple of other things, and we'll see how they fit in. I want to talk about two concepts. One is solar electric cooking as a gateway drug, right? Sure. You know, we all know the gateway drug is these juvenile delinquents start with one type of very minor drug, smoking the evil weed, and then eventually move into a total life of crime, which certain people keep track of. And think about it, one of the big problems with putting in a microgrid, mini grid in a rural village in Africa or Central America is the chicken and egg problem. Do you get people to agree to pay for the microgrid and then wait till enough people agree in a certain area and then put it in the microgrid, hook them up? Or do you put in the microgrid and hope they sign up? Okay, and neither one is a very good alternative. But what if you put in these SunSpot systems? What if you put in 50 or 100 and the neighbor sees you using it, and so they don't buy it, they sign up for $25 a month. And pretty soon you got 100 of these things in a fairly concentrated area. You still own all of them because it's on either a leasing or an energy as a service model. You then pull them out and put in a microgrid, which is more economically thing, but you've already got paying customers there. So it's a gateway to that. It's a gateway to, yeah, maybe they have a SunSpot for a couple of years and their productivity goes up and their health goes up. And now 4 years in, they want to get a refrigerator. They want to get fans and TVs. They build a bigger house. They want to do something else. Their income has gone up because they're more productive, because they're not spending half their time collecting wood or at the health clinic. So it's something that, and at that point, you take the sunspot away, you refurbish it, and you send it out to somebody in an area that's less fortunate, and you charge them less money, maybe $15 a month, because it's a refurbished sunspot. So there's all kinds of things like that. So that's one pathway, the gateway drug to higher services. The second one is, and again, I'm showing my age, and I know you understand, there was a concept called the killer app. When personal computers first came out, everyone said, well, they're really cool, but so what? Big computers work with terminals. Why do we need personal computers? And the killer app that came out was something called VisitCalc. And
I had a copy. Oh, yeah.
VisitCalc was the predecessor of Lotus 123, which was the predecessor of Microsoft Excel. It was a spreadsheet that basically automated a lot of the stuff that accountants were doing on spreadsheets in notebooks. They had these notebooks with columns, and they had to add them up by page and stuff like that. And VisitCalc became so valuable that it was worth buying at the time a $5,000 personal computer, because it improved your productivity so much. So one of the problems with mini grids, microgrids, trying to electrify these off-grid areas is that people aren't using enough electricity to justify all of the distribution system costs, running the poles and the wires and the transformers and the meters and everything, because they're only using 100 watt hours a day to charge their phone and run a couple of LEDs. If they're cooking, if they're supplanting their cooking expenses with electricity, they're now using 2 kilowatt hours a day, 1.5 to whatever it is, kilowatt hours a day. And suddenly the microgrid is much more cost effective, because the generation's freakishly cheap. I mean, solar is just amazingly cheap, but the poles and wires are going to cost the same whether you're delivering 100 watt hours or 2 kilowatt hours. So electric systems designed for electric cooking could potentially become what enables large-scale, cost-effective microgrids. You can also put a sunspot on a weak grid. I'm working with, I have a colleague in Colorado who is working on something, and he's focusing on weak grids. In Zambia, they have an electric grid that's on for about 8 hours a day. Okay. Many other countries, same thing. Especially out in the rural areas, it's only on for a few hours a day. So this one happens to have something here. Got it taken apart. Well, I can plug it into the grid and run it off the grid when it's available, and off the batteries when it's not available, and maybe put in the solar and say use the solar first and then the grid. So you can use it maybe on a microgrid if it's not built for the high loads of electric cooking, or put it on a weak grid, what they call them, and supplement that. So there's a lot of different markets besides the rural areas. Refugee camps, the Malawi project, the ECOCA, is that ECOCA? Their website talks about refugees.
Sure.
Yep. And there, that is a perfect place for off-grid cooking, is in a refugee camp. So there's a lot of different things. Peri-urban areas, we're talking in Kenya, areas are a big potential market for electric cooking. Now, whether it's solar electric cooking or whether it's grid charged battery electric cooking, there's a lot of different things. The sunspot is our brand, and we are laser focused on off-grid market right now. And that's not denying that all these other markets exist, but we have chosen to focus on that. We are working with groups that are very excited. we're a little bit under, I know I'm talking to you about this, but we're a little bit under the radar because we haven't tried to attract major investment yet. We will at some time in the future. And then you'll be reading a lot more about us. But this is exciting. I've been working in solar and rural electrification and everything for 40 years now. And this is the most exciting thing I've ever done.
Well, this is great. And a couple observations. I was asked to speak at a neighborhood meeting about solar power, and the main focus was on community solar, where people could buy in and get 5 or 10% max off of their electric payments. And I just made the statement that, I think everyone could be off the grid when they want to be off the grid, on the grid when they want. And you've just made that point. And the off-grid thing, where it appeals to me is understanding the economics of the last mile problem. You're delivering that Amazon package, you're delivering that electricity, you're delivering the water, the sewers. The study was done by a state legislator here where the exurbs of Minneapolis were getting subsidized by 4 times the amount of any project inside the city and twice as much as the intervening suburbs, because they had a 2-acre lot needed a half a mile of sewer line just for that one property, that kind of stuff. And so the last mile was exponentially larger. You have solved the problem by saying you don't need the grid, you don't even need a microgrid. You need a microgrid. You can use a family-sized grid is starting to get to the point where if they can, that $25 a month, if that is it, and it's going to go down, substantially over like the next 10, 15 years, well, just go right to that. So that's what you're talking about, that if you're solving the last mile problem.
I think that there is a way for everybody to have a fair income for our local partners. And I think if you study clean water franchises now, if you look at how people are supplying clean water in these countries, people are actually going and paying money for clean water for cooking and drinking. And I heard presentations by a couple of these companies that are running these franchises in countries. I've seen them down in Haiti when I visited the Earth Spark systems down in Haiti. I saw a couple of these. And one of the problems is that the local company is making too much money. They actually have to educate the local franchisors on how to manage their money because they've never had that much money. Right. And yet it's fair to everybody. The goal is to make it fair to the customer, to make it fair to the local partner, to make it viable for these impact investors. Now, these aren't venture capitalists who want 40% return. They're impact investors who want to at least not lose their money and use their money to make it grow and maybe make a few percent. That's the type of investors. And it's got to be fair to the companies like ours and the others who are putting in the time and technical work to build up this network. I think it can be a viable economic social enterprise model where people will actually make money.
And you have had, honestly, the luxury of having the kind of experience you've had. How many people have been able to globetrot like that and see the uniform conditions that are in either divergent cultures, different languages and so forth, but you've seen the things that matter the most in each of them. And that's where it counts.
You're familiar with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 goals. And one of them is building local businesses. We actually, I wrote a paper a couple of years ago. I was up at the UN. You had to see me. The UN is a great place because this wasn't the general meeting. It was a specific meeting on science and technology. But these people are still sitting behind desks and they have their country name out in front of them. So during the breaks, I was literally running around the room handing out papers to the countries I was trying to target. It's a lot cheaper than flying there, I'll tell you. Yes. But the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals talk about gender equity, right? I mean, this dramatically affects gender equity. And if you really want to hear about that, talk to Alison Archambault at Earth Spark. She's brilliant talking about that. It talks about save your forests, save your land, not just the forest. reducing deforestation reduces erosion of croplands. So you can improve your productivity, health, improving people's health, education. If the children, especially the girls, aren't out collecting wood and managing fires, and then they can go to school. And so there's all kinds of things that cooking directly affects. I mean, I joke, I say, we're only trying to change something that people have done the same way for 1 million years. Right? And that's true of all of the solar cooking. The stuff with the solar panels, it's a bit frightening at first to talk about 2 of these big solar panels, and people look at that and go, it's too expensive, it's too expensive. It's not too expensive. If you have the right plan, it is going to work. So.
Well, and some reflections on that. Yesterday, I was online with Ahava Zemreski with Sun Buckets, which is one of the major solar thermal ones. And she too is expressing the need to be a social enterprise organization. She talks about having taken over the company and focusing on the women's issues. Sustainable development goals, I had Wilden Fishman, who is on the board of the American Solar Energy Society, do an episode where she went through all 17 and said, here's how solar cooking addresses all 17. I thought if it was, I think at the ISIS, the session I saw, whereas you and 2 or 3 others, was it you or someone that said it addresses at least 10 of the 17? Well, watch Wilden's, because it addresses all 17. No, she doesn't make, okay, here's a referee journal thing that proves point number 14, but she makes the case, just in a very leisurely, informal way about how obviously they would if they're actually adopted. So
cooking is at the key of life. We all do it, right? We all do it. We figure out a way. I mean, people talk about acceptance, and I say my grandparents cooked over who knows what type of fires out in Oklahoma, living in sod huts. That was 2 generations before me. My wife's grandmother grew up in southern Italy, cooking over 3 stone fires. Now, do you think once she got her gas stove here in the United States, she was going to say, "Boy, I sure miss the smoke of cooking"?
No. They're bragging about getting that first gas stove in the town. By the way, sidebar, I don't know if you heard, New York City is talking about banning the gas. I don't know if it's gas cooking or gas heating entirely. Both. I mean, here you go. Talk about having it reverberate back, where you're saving the third world, but let's save the first world too from our own past sins. So anyway,
no, there's that whole movement away from gas for heating and cooking is not just New York. I mean, California. There's an increasing number of studies that especially as we tighten our houses, we get our houses more airtight, that the formaldehydes and everything that are in there are actually causing rise in asthma among children and stuff like that. But Ecuador, it has a program to try to replace 3 million gas cook stoves with induction cook stoves. And that has nothing to do with solar. That's purely moving toward a more, especially as we move toward cleaner electricity, the what's called the beneficial electrification movement is taking place, and part of that is replacing gas stoves with electric. After, I have to tell you, after 4 years of cooking over our trusty Dux Top single thing, we bought an entire range that's induction. So I could actually use more than 1 burner at once, and we are so happy. That's how much I believe in this. I mean, I think that's going to be something that changes the world as well.
I network with people that are building tiny houses, and they want to do the DC so they can do the better deal with the solar. And I've only used it once, but it was amazing. I mean, I just was blown over by how quick it brought everything up to heat and cooked and so forth.
And instant on off. When you turn it off, it turns off like gas.
Yeah. One other reflection, and talking about the 17 development goals, there's something in there about world peace, or fairly broad, but I have a direct personal experience, not being there, but working for the police department here. We have a large Somali community here in Minneapolis. And I worked with a beat officer in the downtown command, which is the downtown area of Minneapolis, first precinct. And she networked with the Somali folks, the imams, the women, the men, the men would come to her and say, and they'd always start with, "I'm sorry, I can't shake your hand." But, and she developed such a reputation. There was some meeting where someone from an outfit with the United Nations or related said, we got a real problem in Somalia with the illegal smuggling of charcoal from Kenya into Somalia. And it sounds like we need someone with law enforcement experience to help shepherd cases and investigations and understand these things. So she was on a 1 year leave of absence from the department to do that, based out of Kenya, where she had to track the smugglers from Kenya to stop it, because Kenya was saying, it's deforestation. We want to start. Kenya's been pretty progressive as far as this stuff, from my perspective, and we got to figure out how to stop it. And she talked about the challenges. Kenya itself is probably somewhat more stable than most of the rest of the continent, but she felt like she made just that one step forward and half a step back kind of a thing in a year's time. But hearing her story, I had her present to my class, and it was, I wish I would have recorded it. It was before I was starting to record my guest speakers, but it was just visceral, the impact it had on people's lives, and the fact that could have broken out into a border conflict, just as nasty as all the others that happen over there. So anyway, just a sidebar, but that's one direct result, or one direct benefit that'll happen if your model ECOCA, if they get out there. I think it's gonna, what conflict? I got what I need here. I don't need to pay this guy to drive 70 miles, 200 miles to deliver charcoal that's taken away the forest. He's gonna run out sooner or later. And meantime, I have this cough that won't go away, et cetera, et cetera. It's just this cascading problem that's going to get solved.
Okay, I want to toss one more thing in here.
Sure.
So we've got SunSpot, and we've got the AC to run. Right now it's AC, but eventually DC to run the cooktop, and we've got USB ports to run lights and phone charging and stuff like that. Right. Yeah. So this is something. Have you ever seen one of these?
It looks familiar.
It fits on top of a standard blue water bottle.
Oh, right.
Okay?
Sure.
So the same type you see in the offices, but imagine turn it upside down so the nozzle is up. This fits on. There's a hose that fits in the bottom.
Sure.
Right. And then what you do is it will pump water. Right. It's USB rechargeable. So you have your clean water source. They use these in China, right? Okay. So you have this one has an additional feature. It has ultraviolet LEDs that come on for a half hour a day, shining down into your bottle, okay, to kill bacteria and stuff in your water. So this would be totally useless to somebody with a charcoal cook stove or something, right? Because you have to supply electricity once a week, right, whatever. But imagine if you had a SunSpot and you had this thing as well, you could potentially address one of the other major issues, which is clean water, healthy water. So there's a lot of things you can do with electricity. And that's part of why I think the SunSpot is going to make a broader difference besides just with cooking.
Sure. Interesting you mentioned that. Just about every other minute or so you've spoken, there's a connection to one of my past episodes. And that exactly is, there's a project, Barry Butler in Oceanside, California, who is also working on electric direct to our PV direct to induction cookers Because when I met him, the first thing he showed me is, oh, look at this, and it's the ultraviolet and the whole thing with the pump and the whole 9 yards, and it's like he put it together in his garage. And I mean, I've seen that before, but I didn't make the connection while he's talking. Like I would have deflated his balloon by saying, well, they're already making it.
I was planning on inventing it in my garage. And then I happened to find it. So I haven't had it formally tested yet. So I can't guarantee it works. And there's certainly other ways of doing it, but that's another revolution. The ultraviolet LEDs are going to revolutionize water purification.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a lot of things going on. It's an exciting time to be working in this. I'm glad all the people are working on all of their panel cookers and solar thermal cookers and stuff. We're focusing on PV modules because I know where to buy them and I know how to work with them. And we think it can be a sustainable business model.
Sure. One example I've used when talking to the folks who are designing solar thermal cookers, the stuff we've seen for the last 40, 50 years, is they always talk about the change in culture, and well, if they can't cook the ugali on your solar cooker, you've failed. And part of me says, I don't know that that's necessarily true, and I think you've alluded to that too. But I always use the example of foot binding in China, where that was a tradition, but then people realized, it took a generation to change. But just a generation where people finally said, does this make any sense? And we got to stop doing it. And I think there's a little bit of that still, even with the solar PV, but the advantage is everyone wants that cell phone. Everyone wants, what we got in the Western world, so to speak. And I mean, that's one advantage, but also another thing, a couple of my guests have said is, we get over there and we're trying to say, well, this is good for the environment. And one guy said that they turned to me and said, we know, we get it. I don't know if you had a chance to glance at my episodes. Like I say, I'm a rank amateur. I'm learning as I go, and I just want to get these stories down. But I'll bet you probably every other one at least will refer to something where your project, Ecoca and so forth, is a good match or can overtake what they're trying to do. So. Yeah.
And there's a lot of these companies I talk to on the ground. They're implementing pay-as-you-go, and they're trying to figure out new things, and they're thinking about this, and they want assistance. This needs to be done at the local level. This is the Peace Corps volunteer in me. We call ourselves recovering Peace Corps volunteers. Yes. Okay. Anyway, I have to get off. Sure. It has been a pleasure.
Same here.
I really enjoyed talking to you. I have to admit, I was just a little bit nervous, but you're so sociable that everything worked out very fine.
Thank you.
That sounds good. And stay in touch and follow the website, www.sunspotpv.com. And we're a little bit slow right now because there's a lot of stuff in the works. And once some of this stuff starts percolating out, there's going to be a lot more on there. So there's a lot of interesting discussion. There's some really good people working on it around the world. Max in the UK, Coca, Columbia University, the guys at UC San Diego, I think, out there working on it. There are a lot of people working on it. There's going to be a lot of good ideas to come out. And hopefully you'll see a lot of good news on Sunspot.
Sounds good. All righty. Well,
okay.
Back to your life. Thanks again.
Okay. Take care. Bye.
Yep. Bye.